right, good morning. Welcome to Product Coffee. We are going to kick it off today with a post that I saw on Reddit just yesterday. Hits a little too close to home. So this one product manager laid it all out on Reddit. He said, quote, "I am so mid and I know that." It wasn't dramatic, it's honest, and it speaks to something a lot of us feel but don't say. We talk about imposter syndrome, and we talk about wondering if we're good enough. So let's unpack the emotion a little bit today, the career reflection, and the real question: what does a top product manager even look like today? So Kelly's dropping the link to the article in the chat for you to take a look at, and Devin's ears are popping out, so let's meet our round table. And let's start off. This guy's a political junkie with a killer sidekick, and we mean the martial arts kind. So let's give it up for Devin Smith, the three-piece powerhouse behind Podium Studios.
Nice.
And he helped design a free product framework, but don't ever ask him to fly economy again. Let's welcome Steve Johnson, the no BS brains behind Product Growth Leaders. And whether he's hiking a trail or mapping a product strategy, he brings snacks, tools, and a love for learning. Meet Jerry Odenwelder, product coach at C Prime. And last but not least, he turns net losses into gains and his living room into a kitten jungle. Meet Aakash Shah, CPTO of My Home Pathway. Hey, Aakash, welcome back.
Everyone, thank you.
Good morning. All right, so I want to dig into this article, and it was a pretty raw, vulnerable post, of course, behind the anonymity of Reddit, but still, we'll give him a little bit of credit for the vulnerability and the self-criticism. But I'd really like to get your thoughts on not only the post itself, but really some of the answers, some of the solutions to the problems that this poster was talking about. And Devin, let me start with you. Do you believe that somebody can be mid on paper but elite in practice?
I do think that it using him using the word mid is so funny. Very, very Gen Z of him. But I do think that I remember the first consulting firm that I worked for. I got wooed away from the bank, and one of the things that I noticed that my boss was really good at was identifying people who, they were working in companies where they had not really, on their resume, they didn't have these like incredible accolades, but he would find out through his network, this person's really good. You need to talk to them. Mm-hmm. And that's how he would find really good people. And I mean, he hired some of the best people I have ever worked with. One guy had never been a developer before. He was actually a linguist, and he met him through a JavaScript boot camp. And he was like, "You're our kind of people." Mm-hmm. And he wound up being one of the best developers I have ever worked with. He was amazing.
Yep. I think it was, some of you know Chuck Blevins. I think he's the guy who tells the story about being in a workshop in the early days of Silicon Valley Product Group. Marty Kagan came and spoke at the company he was working for at the time, and he's kind of talking to him after, and Marty goes, "You're really in the wrong," I think he was an engineer or something. "You really ought to be a product manager. You're the right kind."
Wow. Yeah. So yes, I do believe that.
Cool. What else did you have to say for our downtrodden, pained poster here?
I would say, I've had strong opinions about how to break into product management for a long time, and I personally think that it comes from, in my opinion, a couple of areas. Either working on a team that is trying to ship something, or having passion about a particular vertical and understanding what it takes to ship something. Mm-hmm. Because you can have passion for a vertical and know that industry and be a trash product manager. But if you understand what it takes to ship something, to get something out the door, and you have a passion for a particular vertical and you learn about the problems that need to be solved, I think you can go farther than a lot of folks will early on in their career, because you're focused on actually producing value, which is also what produces value for the business. I think that's the biggest thing. And I think that actually saves you from getting stuck in the product manager who's really a project manager loop.
Yeah, fair enough. Thanks. So Steve, real quick, before you get into your thoughts on this whole conversation, I think I know the answer to this, but have you ever told a product manager, yeah, you might actually be mid?
I'm too old for that kind of language, I guess.
Fair enough.
I do have a story of a guy who I recruited into a product management role from a sales engineer. I had looked at a number of experienced product managers who didn't have what I was looking for. And so I recruited a sales engineer with the promise that I would train him, which is a promise a lot of executives make, and then they don't follow through. But in this case, I trained him to be a product manager. He did it for 10 years, and then he finally said, I'm sick to death of dealing with other people. And he went into sales and instantly became like the number one sales rep at his company because he actually knew the product and he knew the industry and he knew technology.
So I'm sick of dealing with other people, so I'll go into sales.
Yeah.
Awesome. So deal with fewer people as a salesperson than a product manager. Okay. Well, and maybe have to deal with them is definitely part of the answer, right?
I think it was more the internal stakeholders that was driving him crazy.
That's fair. So what's your advice to our forlorn poster here?
Well, I was in a different Reddit thread a while back, and somebody said, how do you get a job as an associate product manager at Google? And my answer was, let me Google that for you.
Uh-huh.
I mean, there's like 10 million articles on that, right? But I think the real struggle we're having right now is there are an awful lot of very qualified people and a lot of wannabes. And the wannabes can't be seen by the hiring manager. But to make it worse, the hiring manager doesn't know what he's looking for. One of my recruiter friends introduced me to the term purple squirrel, which is basically a unicorn that will work for peanuts. They're looking for somebody who has 15 years experience in the domain, 35 years experience in product management, lives in the same zip code as the corporate office, loves to work in the office. Hey, the job pays $85,000, and you're just like, yeah, that's a Venn diagram with no overlap.
Yep.
But it's a shame. I mean, back in the day, in my example of the sales engineer, I mean, it's like he's got the skill set, he's got the knowledge of the industry and the technology. I can teach him the product management thing. That doesn't seem to exist anymore. It seems that everybody is looking for the perfect candidate who may not even exist. Mm-hmm. And they're pretty adamant that we're not going to train you. Mm-hmm. So it's like, come on board if you've got all these skills in place.
Yeah.
If I may, Steve, you need to have like a microphone there that you could drop after that. I mean, I don't know if that could be said any better.
Here we go. I'll give you this.
There we go. There we go.
Need a
Rant
DJ
on.
air horn or something.
Note to self, add mic drop sound effect to the stream deck for next week. So we can just boom. All right. Thanks, Steve. So, Jerry, you're up. But before you get into yours, let me ask you just a quick advice question. When someone feels stuck, should they go on a literal hike or a career one?
There's nothing wrong with a literal hike to think about your career. When you're out in the woods or even out at the park, sometimes a good walk can open your mind up. So I would say take a little bit of both.
Okay.
For sure. And you put me on right after Steve Johnson,
Yes,
who
I
mic
did.
dropped.
That's right.
Shit. And the other thing was, I always thought Steve and I were close to the same age, but now I think he's younger than me because he's using Reddit and sounds like regularly. And, I hit it every once in a while. So I think
the difference between Reddit and LinkedIn is there are actual people in Reddit.
Well, that's a good point. So you think, wasn't there an article recently about some AI bots out there influencing?
Oh, probably.
Influencing the conversation. Anyway, Jason, this poster has a problem that I've been in a lot of conversations about recently. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that has really stood out to me is if you want to get into product management, show that like That's your desire in your company. You can't sit in your cube as a developer or an accountant or a sales rep or an SE and think, oh, product management is going to see me and know what a genius I am and invite me into this. You actually have to get out there and like engage with these folks and ask questions and act like a product manager. I mean,
Yeah.
you are the product in this case, right? And the same for leveling up. If you're going to level up your career, you've got to start asking the next highest level questions, right? The CEO in your company is not thinking about the same things you are as an IC in your company. So you've got to start asking those higher level questions in order to level up and put yourself out there. Get involved in community events, volunteer events. Um, to Devin's point, show that you can deliver. Maybe it's just a document or a sales plan or a budget, whatever it is you're responsible for. Show that you can deliver that and exercise the skills.
And Jerry, let me add to that a little bit. My dad spent his whole career at General Electric before things got weird. And they were required to identify movers and shakers in their organization. So the part of managing people was identifying those people who were ready to move up.
Yeah.
And I think your point is well taken that we're not doing that anymore. It's like we found somebody, they're great in their current job. I hope they like it for the rest of their lives or until we have a layoff.
Yeah. I stumbled into product management myself, and it was after a layoff, and I reached out to my mentor and was sort of, trying to figure out what the next step was because I was going up the engineering management ranks at the time. And had he not said to me, Jerry, I think you'd be happier in your career as a product manager, I would have just gone and looked for another engineering management job or something in engineering. And it was that advice and a connection to a company that was willing to, like you said, Steve, take somebody who had some technical aptitude, enjoyed talking to customers, but wasn't really, versed in the domain, and they were willing to meet me where I was and help me grow in my career. Um, that was a huge benefit. But again, I had to put myself out there. I had to step up and say, this is what I want to do. So,
Yeah, you had a hunger for it.
yeah,
You really went, and I think that's one of the things that I appreciate about this specific post is the guy says, I'm not the kind of product, I don't think I'm the kind of product manager that I aspire to be, but I don't even know what good looks like right now. Dump it on me. Help
Yeah.
me understand what great looks like so that I can look at, so that I can chase that target. Akash, you recently went through a transition in a period like not much unlike this guy where you felt mid. I'm just kidding. The
Yeah.
but you were in between two roles. You were out there on the market trying to figure out in this really bloody market that we're in right now where you were going to
Yep.
land next, and you ended up with a great CPTO role. Was it two kittens and seven wedding parties that fixed that, or was it something else?
Yeah, it was the wedding party that did it. No. I was when I was reading this, one, it hit home. And then second, if I shared this Reddit thread with 15 people in my network and choose randomly, I bet you at least half of them feel something similar. And I think what's happening is the market is so tough that it makes you question if you're good enough for it because the application rate to interview rate is abysmal. Like, we're talking about conversions as a product manager, right? Adoption and those types of things. So you're going to notice that for every 100 applications, I get one call. And then for every one call that I get, I really barely get a second interview, right? And so you start to question yourself. You start to question your resume. You start to question your experience. You could doctor your resume about a million times. And then you're like, I think I got it to a perfection level and I'm still not getting the calls. So I empathize with this individual because I went through that. And just to give you a sobering statistic, at one point I counted, I had applied to 1,300 total roles in one year.
Whoa.
So to give you context, it was not because I was mid. it had everything to do with how difficult this market is. Now, I've been in an executive role since 2015, so it's about 10 years in product or operations, VP plus roles, majority of that time, all of that time. And executive roles typically take about 8 months to fill. And so, yeah, I kind of saw that coming and whatever. But what typically happens during those 8 months is there's traction, right? You reach out to your network, you have a pretty decent network, and you start to kind of realize that it is entirely employer's market. And the individual has very little that they can control, right? The resume, the interview, etc. But I just want to first say I empathize with not just the poster, but hundreds of people in this product space who are having this difficulty. And if you haven't had this difficulty, you are top talent, right? So you somehow have reached the pinnacle where you have the perfect network, the perfect resume, the perfect job lined up, and you just keep getting calls to do the new ones. But I would say the number one thing I think about what landed me this role, one was persistence. Like I literally started reaching out to CEOs. I said, all right, if I'm looking for an executive job, I probably need to just go straight to the decision maker.
Yep.
None of the recruiters, none of this like mid stuff. I probably talked to 50 recruiters. Nothing really pans out in that space because they're really looking out for themselves and what jobs they have to fill. So it's really about reaching to the decision maker. So that would be one advice for me is try to find whoever the decision maker is for the role that you're looking for and get in front of them. And I think there's a lot of biases and a lot of concerns that get dispelled once you're in front of them. You have a personal conversation and talk about your history. The second thing is what would make someone a top? I find three things to be a marker for a really, really exceptional product manager. Number one, they're super customer obsessed. And they show that in the actions they've taken, the research they've done, even like past projects and past products that they've driven. Do they understand their customer really well? Did they solve their problems? Did they grow that product, etc.? So customer obsessed. Second is domain expertise. In a employer market, domain expertise is your in. So there's a product manager right now designing carpets. They're not doing online stuff. They're not designing websites. They're not doing AI tool. They're literally designing carpets. So if you want to be a carpet product manager, you need to have domain expertise. So develop that, understand it, whichever area you want to go in, develop that domain expertise. And I'd say the third thing is judgment. What separates a mid to a top product manager typically is the judgment that they make, the decisions that they make. And it takes time to develop really, really high judgment, but it only takes time if you put work into it. Just because you've aged 10 years does not mean you've learned 10 years of things.
That's fair.
Right. And so I think customer obsession, domain expertise, and judgment. I think they sit in front of the decision maker and they show those three things, very high chance they land a role. So hopefully that advice lands with a lot of folks who've been in my position, or are currently in that position.
Awesome. So I think one of the things I love, you talked about kind of two lenses there, Aakash, and that really picked up. I saw one of the responses in the thread kind of touched on this as well. There is a difference between being, and to the question that I asked you earlier about being great on paper versus actually being elite in execution, there is a difference between being great on paper and great at interviewing and great at job searching and being great as a product person and having that commitment to customer value. And right now in this market, just being a great product manager isn't enough. You've got to be great at going after a job. You've got to outcompete in that vein as well. And that hasn't always been the case when there weren't enough product managers to fill all the product management roles that were out there. So that's a huge...
If you are in this situation, you are the product. So how are you driving adoption?
Boom.
There you
How-
go.
Boom.
who is your customer? How are you crafting your features, your messaging to the right audience?
Yep.
That's
Yeah.
the question. If you're
Yeah.
the product,
And
right?
Akash, I thought about that when you made the statement of getting in front of the right executive or getting in front of the right manager. As product managers, our job is to get in front of the right customer, to carve out the customer, the market, the target customer we have, and get in front of those people and
Yep,
talk to them and understand what they want. It's the same thing.
exactly. I think so.
I like it.
One of the things, there you get your mic drop.
Aakash, you get the mic drop award, man.
I know, Akash
Well,
and
Steve
Steve.
already had it. Steve, you got to mail it to me, man.
Well, we just we're going to need more mics. So one thing I do want to go back and address though is the question of not only there's a lot of frustration about getting a job, but there's also the real passionate question about what can I do to be great.
Yeah.
And being great is something that people are like. And certainly, we've got a community of product managers who are here at Product Coffee because they want to outperform and deliver exceptional value. And I was listening to a conversation, Lenny's podcast, just this morning, as a matter of fact, with the CPO of Revelit, and they are one of the companies that he's identified as being one of the top 3 companies to turn out high value alumni product managers. They go on to be CEOs and CPOs and start companies and VPs of product and so on and so forth. And they looked at what they're looking to hire in general. And what they love to hire is product managers, just like this poster, who have been product managers in startups where you have to do a lot of things.
Yeah.
And I know my first product management job came on the heels of my own startup. And they're looking for people with a absolute passion to do things that are that change the market, that create massive change and deliver massive value. If you are on fire to deliver powerful things and then you can execute on that, that's what they're looking for. And they weren't looking for necessarily a whole lot of experience. And this is, one anecdotal case, but as I look at the great product managers that I've worked with over my career, there is absolutely a ton of value and critical value in having good product management skills, technical skills, process skills, so that you can manage a product and manage a team and an organization to success. But the underlying fundamental common factor was that absolute obsession with delivering greatness. And you need to be able to show that. You need to be able to show that you're on fire for it when you get in that interview. And it's something that you can't fake. If you don't feel like you have it, you can develop it. So you need to find the customers that you empathize with and you hate to see their pain.
Yeah.
And then go seek out the opportunity to prove that.
Oh man, that's so well said, man. Oh my goodness,
Totally.
that's it right there.
We need a lot of mics. We need a lot of mics.
Yeah, man. Customer obsession, like you said, being obsessed with the problem. Being obsessed with the problem. I've said many, many times that I think a great product manager is basically a mini CEO, and a great CEO is obsessed with the customer and delivering value to the customer and empowering their team to do that. Hiring great people who want to do the same thing, who want to be A players, who can get to the point where they can, do alley-oops and behind the back passes, and it's all focused on the customer. Mm-hmm. And I think that one of the things that he says, and I think you're right, he has experience that a lot of product managers at larger companies do not have. Right. If you have been at a startup, you've been close to the metal. Mm-hmm. And there is a big difference between a product manager who has had the benefit of the massive infrastructure and systems of a company that has established product market fit, and they may never get to touch something there that is a whole product or something that has major impact. I got my first real taste of product when I was at Wells Fargo. You getting to touch something, and I wasn't even in a product role. The product manager appreciated what I brought so much that she let me into doing some of the product work with her because she liked working with me. But at Wells Fargo, I mean, you are a cog in a 300,000 person wheel. Mm-hmm. And the chances of you getting the kind of experience that this guy got working at startups is very small.
Yeah.
That's actually why I left, because a guy who was a product guy told me, he Steve Jobs'd me. He said, you can stay at Wells Fargo and maybe you'll learn what you need to learn in 10 years, or you can come work for me and you'll learn it in 2. And that's all I needed to hear. I quit. And I do not regret that decision. Not one day of my life. That was one of the best career decisions I ever made, was working for that guy. He's the best boss I've ever had.
That is awesome. That's great. So one of the things that keeps coming up is the notion of personas and understanding your customer and the relative value of personas in doing so. So we're going to talk about that a little bit today. And we've got some great folks on the call who have some amazing thought leadership chops. You've met them in the first cup discussion. And we've also got some folks in the audience who've got a lot of thoughts on this topic. And I'm looking forward to bringing everyone around to discuss this. So just to kind of tee up the whole conversation, it's 2025. And your persona dot might be sitting there collecting dust more than it's actually helping you with insight. People tend to define these personas and put them on a shelf and not go back to them very often. But before we debate how useful they are, let's talk about what we're even talking about. Let's kind of define that. In B2C companies, the buyer and the user might be the same person. In B2B companies, they rarely are the same person. So when teams say persona, they might mean a buyer persona, they might mean a customer persona, but they might mean a segment, an archetype, or even a job to be done. There's a ton of confusion, and it's no wonder why. So this week on our call, we're going to create some clarity, some context, and we're going to have some really honest conversations about value. What are product teams actually using to understand their customers today, and what's working in the wild? We'll wrap with the product coffee perspective, but first, we want to hear from you. So, just by a show of hands, hitting the raise hand icon at the bottom of your Zoom chat there, if you're here in the Zoom with us, who is actually using personas right now, or if you're in between roles, in your most recent role in your process? Just raise your hand if you're actually using personas right now. See a few hands going up. So, and then the other question that I'm really interested in, get your fingers on the chat. Get ready for this. If you've ditched personas altogether, if you used them and you see, you know what, these are a waste of my time, hit ditched. Type ditched into the chat for me. See what we get. So I see ditched, but clients sometimes insist, and that buying states, not personas, and we're definitely going to talk about that. Anybody else ditched them? We got a couple more hands going up. So let's dig into a little bit of what we're talking about here. And before we go further, let me just kind of define a couple things for you. Personas are detailed character sketches, like Samantha the soccer mom, who clips coupons, runs carpools, and has 5 minutes to make a decision. That's an example that you might actually hear out in the room, right? Then there's this concept of archetypes. And these are more behavioral and mindset-based concepts. So you'll see an archetype like the skeptic or the overachiever or the loyalist.